Welcome to Systemize Your Success. I'm Dr. Steve Day. If you're considering hiring a remote worker from the Philippines, or you already have a Filipino-based team, then today's episode is a must-listen in my opinion. I interview Nicolas Bivero. Now, he's been helping people to work with Filipino-based workers for over a decade. He has offices over there, and this is his full-time job. Myself, I am an advocate and hugely passionate about working with people from the Philippines, and my entire team is based in the Philippines. Today, you've got two industry experts going head to head discussing the pros and cons of working with Filipino remote workers, about some of the challenges and the cultural differences that we have to overcome and actually adapt to, but how those differences can also be massive benefits to us as business owners. So if you want to know how to get more out of your Filipino team, or you have any questions about how this might work in your business, continue listening as you'll learn exactly the way that we go about this to make this work in reality. So the question is this: how do entrepreneurs like us, who don't have an endless supply of cash, how do we leverage the best apps, virtual assistants, automation tools, and systems to scale our businesses, increase our profits, and have more time to do what we love to do each day? That is the question, and this podcast will give you the answer. My name's Dr. Steve Day, and this is Systemize Your Success. Hey, Nicolas, so nice to have you on the show. Thank you very much for coming on. Let's get started and tell the audience a little bit about what you do. And more importantly, what I want to know is why you decided to get into what you do and any of the interesting story behind how it all began.
Yeah, no, it's a pleasure being here. Thank you very much for having me. I mean, why do I do what I do? It's a very long story actually. But it's a good question. So I've been living for the last 22 years in Asia, and I got the fortunate opportunity of working in Japan with a Japanese company. And part of my work for them was to do business development in Southeast Asia for them. And I, over time, specialized myself in the Philippines, and set up about 4 companies with them in the Philippines as joint ventures. And during that experience, or during that time, I got exposed to the Filipinos and really managed together with a team to set up some really interesting companies in very different industries. And that exposure to different industries and different types of roles that we were filling and jobs that we were doing in the Philippines itself was quite eye-opening about how good Filipinos are, how very nice team members they can be, what amazing teams we were able to build and successful businesses. But at the same time also how outside of the Philippines, most people don't even know about it. They think most Filipinos are nurses or seafarers or things like that, but they don't know of all the other roles. I mean, a lot of people, of course, there are people who know, but there's a lot of people who don't know. So I think that experience of working with Filipinos, building Filipino teams, and then an opportunity which came about because my best friend and co-founder needed to scale his startup. And my idea was like, well, if you need to scale a startup and you need good people, why don't we do it with Filipinos? Why don't we do it in the Philippines? That's how everything came about 11 years ago. And it was a very, very nice way of combining my experience, my exposure, the work I had done for many years in the Philippines and with Filipinos, with the need of my friend, and putting those two things together and bridging that gap. So that's how this happened. Yeah.
Cool. I like it. And then, so dare I ask, how is the company going that your friend founded?
The company my friend founded went very well, actually, and they grew to quite a nice size. They managed to actually then sell the company, but they still work in the company. So they did quite well, and they still have a team of about 90 people in the Philippines with us, actually. So the Filipino team they built over those years was essential for the success of the company, and even being able to get to the stage that they were able to sell themselves. So it's quite interesting. And even the company who bought them now is starting to build other teams with us in the Philippines, because they looked at this company they bought and they're like, oh, see there, they use Filipinos. Maybe we should look into this. There might be something here. So it's quite nice to see.
Yeah, I've got so many great stories of my clients who work with Filipinos. I was explaining before we came on camera that I've been an advocate of Filipino team workers for years now. I think the first time I hired someone from the Philippines about 8 years ago, thereabouts. And since then, my entire team, with a few exceptions of remote workers in different countries, but say 90% of the people I've ever worked with have been from the Philippines. And
And how did you go about how did you where did the idea of the first 8 years ago the first person came about? I mean, how did that happen? Out of curiosity,
good
to turning
question.
this around a little bit and
No, that's
asking you
fine.
now.
No, this is great. I love conversational interviews. It's brilliant. So I think it was from the 4 Hour Work Week, actually, by Tim Ferriss, if I
Hmm.
remember, and that was probably what planted the seed. And then I also read a book by a guy who later became a coach of mine, Rob Moore, called Life Leverage, and he again talked about outsourcing. And then I went through an agency and had a remote worker, not from the Philippines, from somewhere in India actually. But I was paying them sort of like paying them for like 10 hours work, and then they
Hmm.
did to work for me, and that sort of went terribly. And then eventually I did a course which actually helped explain how to hire people specifically from the Philippines. And then I went, okay,
Oh,
well, I'll give
interesting.
that a go. And then I ended up building my own recruitment system specifically for the Philippines. And so like for like hiring individual people to work with me, it's worked really well. And I've got examples of like one of my clients. You just think about your example of like hiring a team. Like they literally shifted over the years I've worked together with them. They've shifted like 70% of their entire operations now. Very small business. They've got about 12 employees, but like 6 or 7 of them are in the Philippines. And all of their
Yep.
operational stuff is run there. Like that's the almost like invert commas the brain of the operations is based over there. And then the people on the ground are the people that have to be on the ground doing physical things in the UK. But yeah, so much so. Yeah, total. This is why I'm excited about speaking to you because I'm being a total advocate, and for someone like you who's living and breathing it every day and working with much bigger organisations as well than I typically work with, just fascinating to see how this is how the what the opportunities are going forward. Cool. Okay, so I know there's a story. From your story, there's a why behind the Philippines from a personal perspective. But if somebody like me, I could pick any country in the world. Like remote workers, a remote worker. So why do you think like the Philippines makes sense? What is it about people from the Philippines, about their attitudes, their culture, whatever, that actually make it just work? Whereas maybe in some other cultures, when Europe Europe hiring from outside of Europe, so to speak, or America hiring outside America. Like, why do Philippines work better than others?
Well, I mean, to be fair, I don't even know if you can always say it works better. I think Filipinos, like any culture, have certain strength, but they also have certain weaknesses. And I guess it really comes down to what is the problem you're trying to solve as an organization, as a company. And then if that problem is a specific problem where Filipino talent and the Filipino mindset and attitude can really be a strength, then it makes sense to actually go with the Philippines or look into the Philippines. But to be honest, I think there are great people in other locations. I mean, I mean, South America could be has great people. South Africa has great people. India has great people. I mean, every economy has something. And I think the Philippines in particular, it's a combination of the location. So the time zone can be very helpful. So for some clients and for some companies, that's really what they're looking for when they're trying to build like 24/7 operations, follow the sun kind of principle. The culture itself, Filipinos are very warm, very embracing the history, having been hundreds of years a Spanish colony and then being for 60 years an American colony, and the whole schooling system being based on the American system originally. So that also helps obviously with the English and the exposure. So I mean, I might be biased, or I'm definitely biased, but it's most likely the most westernized Southeast Asian culture that you have in Southeast Asia. I mean, because of uh, the whole exposure they had. I mean, their favorite sport is basketball, so that already tells you a lot. And not yeah, NBA. So it is. There are certain cultural traits from their history, from their exposure, from the colony time that has made them very able to integrate into certain types of operations and certain roles very seamlessly. Specifically, roles where you require a lot of empathy and warmth and welcomeness. And that's why they're so good in customer support, customer success, um, being good team players. There are other roles also, to be very fair, where I would not necessarily recommend Filipinos to start with. I mean, if you want some really hardcore cold calling salespeople, yes, you can build that in the Philippines, but it's maybe not what Filipinos like to do the most, chasing people and harassing people. So maybe not the best thing to do from the Philippines. Maybe you have other countries where people are more keen in those type of roles. So I think it really comes down to what is the problem you're trying to solve in your organization for which you need talent, and then checking if Philippine talent is a good fit for that, for that role, for what you're trying to build. And maybe it isn't. Maybe you're building something where you're better off with South Africans or Indians or South Americans, or yeah, I mean, especially if you want Spanish speakers.
Yeah, great answer, by the way. And I think that one of the these are sweeping generalizations, of course. And we're
Absolutely.
saying we're like in this conversation, we're talking about an entire population of a nation of millions and millions of people, and we're saying they're this fit. Which, of course, there are exceptions to every rule, and there
Hmm.
are people of one extreme to the other within this. But I agree with you that from experience of working with South Africa, a couple of people from South Africa, South America, India, Scandinavia, and from the Philippines, you do seem to see traits of the
Yeah.
same types of like good at certain things, terrible at other things, like and the same challenges you get. And just thinking about those cultural challenges, like what as working with a remote team, you obviously have to be aware and empathetic towards the cultural needs or the cultural differences between yourself and the country you're working with. So, what do you have you seen that has been a challenge, and maybe what has been? You mentioned some benefits already of the personality type, but what are those challenges of working with people from the Philippines from a cultural perspective, and how do you help your clients overcome them?
Yeah, I mean, one of the challenges, so it's like all like I mentioned before, I mean, their strength can also be a weakness. So when you are very warm, very kind, very embracing as a culture, and this is obviously generalization, but most Filipinos fit that, then that attitude of want to embrace, let's say, your coworkers or even your bosses, your organization, and make everybody happy can also backfire, because then maybe you're not as outspoken as your boss maybe wants you to be, or the company, or the CEO, whoever is sitting somewhere else. They might also expect a certain degree of bluntness that Filipinos maybe not as comfortable with. And so there is then immediately a culture gap that we try to mitigate by doing that type of like proper onboarding. Okay, how do you work with a Filipino team, and vice versa? How do you, Filipino, work with, let's say, a British boss or an American boss or an Australian boss or wherever your boss is from? Because there is a cultural gap, there is a communication difference, and it is important to try to help mitigate that through learning, exposure, and other ways. Even what we do also is we actually get in touch with our employees, try to get the Filipino to Filipino, that information, to feed it back to our clients, so that we can also help in the back end a little bit, mitigate those challenges. Because Filipinos, as I said, very warm, but they don't necessarily want to then, you know, say bad things about you, or tell you like, listen, you're killing me here, you're overworking me, give me a little bit of more time. Instead, they will just say like, yes, okay, I will do it, but then it fails, and then the other person gets frustrated, especially in the European context, I guess. Sometimes, I mean, I'm half German, and then the German would say like, well, why didn't you tell me? If you would have told me, we could have talked about it, so that type of cultural difference is really something where we try to help bridge that. And a lot of that is actually also by explaining and exposure, you know keep explaining, keep reminding. It takes time. Yeah.
Yeah, that's something I've experienced on many occasions, and on occasion become very frustrated by someone just saying yes, even though they totally know, or you think they would know, that there's no chance this is going to get done. They've got a mountain of work, it's sky high, and yet there's still that inability to push back. So it's actually one of the key things that I work at training anyone that works with me, who's specifically from the Philippines, but anywhere else as well, is like the permission to push back, the permission to say no, and also not only that, the expectation that you will say no, otherwise I'm going to blame you when it goes wrong. So like flip it around, like that is something. So I completely um, hear that. I've experienced it, and but also if you're aware of it, like you do, like taking the time to consciously think about how can I help this manager, this employer, and also how can I help the employee to understand those differences. Like if you're doing that, I mean, I do it for myself, but you're doing it and helping people directly, which is fantastic. To actually not expect people just to get it, understand it.
People, you can't. I mean, I think that is when you are going to set yourself up to fail. Doesn't matter if you hire one person, if you hire a whole team. You will, if you're expecting people to act exactly the same, and it's the way you are, it's in your culture, then you're going to set up you're setting yourself up to failure. I think it's very important to be aware of those cultural nuances and cultural differences and try to work with them instead of working against them. I mean, it's easier said than done, but once you get over that, as you said yourself, once you do that conversation, have those conversations, and and turn things a little bit or change a little bit the things, then it can be super successful. And there's enough proof in the Philippines and in other countries that it can be really, really successful to have remote teams. Um, but if you go in there, let's say again, using the example of a half German, if you go in there with your mindset like, oh, we're going to do this the German way, then you're gonna fail. I mean, this is not going to happen. Yeah. But I think that would also fail even if you hire somebody in Romania or Czech Republic or wherever, because it's you can't go with your culture and try to impose that on a different culture. It's not going to work. Yeah. This is my opinion.
Totally agree. But I also think it's regardless if you use the word culture or like where someone's from, just thinking about personality types. I mean, all the
Also,
work that's like disc modeling or whatever, like the Myers-Briggs or whatever you're looking at with regards to personality typing, like when you understand that how people think is different and you understand that their needs are different and therefore how you communicate with them will get you a better result, or sorry, if you communicate them for a specific way, you'll get a better result. I mean, that's just good human, being a good human, like actually utilizing the skills we have as communicators to be able to adapt it to the situation. And this is no different. It's just taking on board that there are differences that may be cultural, but actually it's just the same. Like we just need to be aware of the person we're speaking, what the needs are of the person we're speaking to get the best result we can.
no, I agree with you. I mean, and I think what we have seen over the last 11 years is that those organizations and those managers who are more sensitive to that or more aware of that. I mean, people who say like, listen, because what you say is true. Let's say British company, even if you hire a whole team in England, those people will all be slightly different. They're not all the same. And if you manage those differences by proactively and you approach the same attitude when building a remote team, that's gonna be much more successful than if you say if you treat them all the same. So we have seen that organizations which are much more sensitive to that and aware of that are much more successful than somebody. But I think it's also the approach, to Steve, to be very honest, when somebody goes and looks at remote staffing or remote team as a warm buddy, this is just somebody I need to, do something. That approach already is likely going to be a problem. But if you look at it, it's like, no, this is an extension of my core team, just happens to be across the globe.
Yeah.
And if you approach that and you try to onboard them to your team the same way as you would onboard somebody that you hire at home, that makes a huge difference. It makes a huge difference to the employee, but it makes a huge difference also how you approach the people and how you start working with them, onboarding them, and bringing them into your organization. So it's both being aware of the cultural difference, but it's also about how you approach team building itself, and I think that's what we also see can make a huge difference.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've got great, or not great, terrible examples of people who have hired that I've been aware of, like clients of mine, and you speak to them after months or whatever, and this person they've hired who's based in Philippines, for example, has never met the other team members who are based in the company. And they're literally just like a side thing that you throw work at and it comes back done. And like other extremes are like the guy I talked about before, a guy called Giorgio. I've actually interviewed on this podcast about his team. And he is the opposite. It's like full integration. It's like everybody is equal. So there's no difference between where somebody's based. So they have pizza evenings together. They do cook-offs and are all remotely. Like it's beautiful. I actually interviewed him on this podcast about the remote team building exercises he does to make it work. So it's a great episode to get some top tips. Well, actually from one of my clients, but he excels in that compared to me. So yeah.
No, and it's even if you really want to build a high quality and high performing team, those integrations are very important, and even more nowadays where you have distributed teams. And it's interesting. But it's funny to see how still people push against it. It's like, no, 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 I'm going to just throw it over the fence and expect them to deliver perfectly. I'm like, how? How is this going to work? Anyway, it's fascinating to see what you have.
Yeah, I'm actually interested to know a little bit more about what you do because we talk about and sharing brilliant insights, but I think it'd be super helpful to actually understand like what is it you actually do? Who do you help and how do you help them? And where does the Philippines fit into all this?
You mean in terms of companies or in terms
Yeah.
of
No, I mean, what work do you do? Obviously, I introduced you as work the work you do, and you help companies work with Philippines. But explain how that works. Like, what is it that you do differently to others, and just exactly like who do you work with, and how do you actually help them build teams?
well, I don't know if we do things differently than others. I'm sure there are others who do this what we do. It's I think what we have been trying to focus on and is always try to understand, okay, what's the problem you're trying to solve? I mean, what is it that because again, I know that people are looking for talent, they're looking for people, but they're looking for people for a reason. It's like, okay, my problem is I'm scaling and I need more. I need more people to help me with that scale, or help me deliver my service, or help me do designs or whatever it is overnight. So it's that nuance which is important to also then understand. Okay, what is the challenge you're facing, and how can Filipino talent fit into that solution that you're looking for. So again, the approach is it's not like I need warm bodies. It's like I need people who can really be part of the solution and part of that whatever team I'm trying to build to provide that solution. So understanding then also the nuances of the job description of the work that you're trying to or the talent that you're trying to find enables us then to do a much better recruitment process and look at finding the right people who really fit your culture, your must-haves, your nice-to-haves, the tools, the working environment, the hours that you want the people to work. So it's a more what we have tried to build and what we have built is a more consultative approach. It's not like, hey, I need an accountant. Now find me somebody who somehow fits this, and then let some magically try to make it work. It's more, okay, you're looking for an accountant, but why? What is it? What is the challenge you're really having? And what type of accountant would help you solve that problem? And then we try to work with our clients on finding the right person, the right fit. It's not always perfect, and sometimes it takes longer. But then if we find that, and if we're able to then bring that talent in and make it part of our client's team, ideally, again, not always perfect, but ideally, because it's a better fit, because it went more deeper, it will be more successful, and it will last longer. Because so the other thing we try to always work with our clients is like, it's not a short-term solution. I mean, that might be the case for some specific roles and projects, but it's a long-term solution. It's an extension of your team. So effectively, you're also not hiring in England or in Sweden somebody for like, oh, I'm going to hire somebody just for like 3 months and then I don't care anymore. No, no, I'm hiring somebody because I want this person to be part of my next phase of my growth, or my service delivery, whatever it is. And so if that mindset is the right mindset, then you will also recruit differently. You will look for somebody that you're like, hey, this is the person I feel that I want to have in my team. And that makes a huge difference, not only to you, but also to the employee. Employee will feel that during the recruitment process, will feel that during the onboarding process. That there's a very different engagement if you treat people like that. So it's something that we have been trying to build, or we're still working on. It's never perfect. There's always improvements, but it's really to build those remote teams that are part of your core team, and therefore you treat them accordingly. We help you then also with setting them up, learning and development, whatever else you need from an HR perspective that we can help make it a success over time. Yeah. So I hope that answers a little bit the question. Yeah. So it's going a little bit deeper. It's trying to understand more of what it is, and then try to solve that problem by providing you the right talent for that solution. Yeah.
Yeah, no, awesome. And I think that concept of hiring who is in effect a contractor, you're hiring them as a remote worker. Typically, you're doing on a contract basis rather than employment basis. But what I've taken on board over the years, and what I try to advocate on this podcast and anyone I work with, is that exact philosophy of think of this as a long-term engagement, just like you would an
Mhm.
employee, exactly what you just said. And the like my current social media sort of marketing, she's been with me for 5.5 years, something
Yeah,
like that.
it's a
Like
long
people I've
time.
had 3 to 5 years is a good, like, obviously some people don't work out and you let them go, but the people that have stuck around with me, they've stuck around for years. And it's so like it's just like having it is for me, having an employee is exactly the same experience because you get to know this person and grow with them, and they grow with you and they grow with the company, and all the benefits that come from that. So yeah, massively I agree with you.
No, it is an extension of your team. I mean, and I think that's very important because when you have that mindset and you treat them accordingly, then as I said, they will feel that and they will also commit much more to you and to what you're doing than if they just feel like, oh, I'm just a warm body. They don't really care about me. They just need me to deliver X, Y, Z, and then what happens afterwards is irrelevant. So that makes a huge difference. And you can see that. But I think what you mentioned there a moment ago is important to also understand. You're still hiring a human. You're still employing somebody, and that doesn't matter if you do this at home, if you do this remotely, if you do this in the Philippines. It's not always 100% fit. Sometimes, even with the best processes, the best interviews, and whatnot, you hire the wrong person, and because it's humans. Some things you only discover after the facts. And it's funny because sometimes we do have clients who say like, "Oh, but how is this possible? I thought it's 100% fit." And I'm like, "I'm sure where you're coming from. It's never 100% fit, but we try our best to make it as close to 100% as possible. But it will never be 100%. Some people just don't work out. Some people are just not the right vibe or the right chemistry between teams." Yeah.
Yeah. There's a book that I love called Traction by Gino Wickman, and he talks about the right person and the right seat. And no matter how good somebody is on paper and how good they are at the job, they may just be the wrong person for the company. It could be a
Yeah,
value a
yeah,
values mismatch, personality mismatch, whatever. Then that can be as important as someone's competence. Or it could be the way around, that they're a brilliant person, but they just can't do the job. And then it's like, can you find another seat for them? If not, then unfortunately, no matter how nice they are, they're probably going to have to go. But yeah, like
yeah.
you
That's
say,
true.
we're dealing with humans, and humans are unpredictable people or unpredictable entities, I should say. Yeah, cool. What sort of size companies do you work with? Like, do you source like individual workers, or just are you looking to build teams within organizations?
So in we do both, but in general, most of our clients, especially when they are just fresh to the whole building a remote team, they usually start with 1, 2 people because we call it actually proof the concept. So they need to feel confident that the talent is right, that they can build a team, that they are able to work remotely and set it up. And then what we see over time is that once they get that comfort level with the remote team, and they realize, hey, this works, this is good, the people are nice, this is all working out better than we expected, then they start looking at their org chart and then deciding, oh, what about this role? What about that role? As they grow and as they change, or as they sometimes have people at home who either retire or leave or go for new opportunities, and then they start expanding their teams. And I mean, it really depends. We have some clients who decided to really go very, very vertical into like one specific type of role, like only accounting or only marketing or only something. But then we have more often than not companies who started with that, but then realized, hey, what about this thing or that thing? And then they went horizontal across the organization chart, which is really exciting. It's like similar to what you said about that other company a while ago that has like 60% of their team in the Philippines. It's like that wouldn't happen if you, I mean, under normal circumstances, if you only hire in one specific department, one specific role. That can only happen if you go and say like, oh, okay, now I need a marketing person, or let me look for marketing over there, or now I know I need a graphic designer, or let me look for graphic designer. So and that's to me is actually exciting because then you see over time companies growing and evolving, and when you look deeper, you're like, hey, actually, a very large amount of your business is done by Filipinos in the Philippines. That's pretty cool, that's great for the Philippines. It's great for the people, and it's actually exciting to see. At least I get excited about that. Yeah,
Yeah, and there is, you know, not to shy away from it, there is massive cost benefits typically for most
absolutely.
countries hiring from the Philippines because the cost of living is significantly lower than many countries like US or UK or Europe in general. And so actually, like, and I was speaking to someone today, like they're just about to start hiring for their first role. And the role that we're discussing them hiring for is what I call the autopilot architect role. And this is somebody who basically does what I do as I'm in effect in one of my roles as a process consultant. So I help people to understand how to get the things in their head down a way that other people can build for them. And
Okay.
whether it's the key personnel in the business or the expert knowledgeable workers in the business or the business owner often as well, if they haven't quite elevated themselves to a CEO role yet, so they're still sort of holding everything together. And it's how do we interview that person, create or document the systems that can then be
Mm.
either automated or AI or just systemized. And so what we're now in this particular role, we're like hiring this person to do that role. So it's not like they're coming in as like an admin person, whatever. It's like we're trying to find. We've sort of had much success with this in the past as well, of hiring this specific role from the Philippines and bringing them in to actually help the companies at a completely different role. And the reason I say this is because often like people think about, okay, I've got this replacing somebody in the business or whatever, but actually there is opportunities, I think, to utilize, especially because of the affordability, to bring somebody in, say from the Philippines, to be a role which you wouldn't necessarily have hired for otherwise. And so this role is often one which is just left to the business owner to deal with. And so, but actually, because of the cost, we can say, look, we can actually hire somebody in to be this integrator that helps you to create the systems, which they don't really have a role in terms of they're not in the marketing team, they're not in the sales team. Okay, they are in the operations team, but it's more about this fitting everything together. And the same thing with the other end of the scale is like the admin person is like bringing in a what I call an assistant rather than admin to support all of the key work people in your company. Suddenly they can then start delegating down all the stuff that they shouldn't be doing to elevate themselves up. And those, I think, are really great ways for people to actually look beyond the typical roles as well of like, how do we actually like complement our existing team by bringing in this talent from the Philippines to actually fill these obvious gaps when you actually look at it, but sometimes hidden gaps because they're just sort of problems in the company we don't know how to fix. And suddenly you can actually get people just focusing on fixing these problems. So yeah.
Yeah, no, I think it's we have seen that, and it is partially the affordability. I think, as you called it, is what makes that possible. Where you can look at it and say, like, well, we have had this conversation with a few clients where we said, like, okay, come up with your dream role. Like, what is it? What is it? If you would have the money, what would you hire? What would be super helpful for you? And then they come up with a task list or even a job description, and then they get surprised. They're like, wait, you can. So let me give you an example. We had a
Yeah,
client who had built a whole team of not with us. They had in the US, they had a team of salespeople using a new CRM system, but he was highly frustrated about like the CRM, and then his salespeople having to do a lot of like fixing of the CRM and whatnot. And well, my feedback was like, why don't you get a CRM administrator? And his feedback was like, well, that's highly, because we had accountants for him already. And he's like, well, that's so expensive. And I'm like, well, maybe if you look at it and you give us a job description, we can look at it in the Philippines and let's see what we find. And then, lo and behold, we found somebody at a fraction of the cost. And he's like, oh, no, for that? Yes, then I can hire that and I can hire somebody
exactly.
else and I can do. So it's that, but
Exactly.
it's that eye opener only comes when you start looking at it. And I think the other way of looking at affordability is even in a different direction, because let's say you have a budget. Let's say you budgeted for 2026 to hire another salesperson. Let's stay with sales. But if you then look at, hey, if I do this, let's say remotely, regardless if it's the Philippines or South America or South Africa or whatever, how much would that person cost me, that talent cost me? How much of my budget is then still left that I can utilize for other things? Yeah. And then what we sometimes see is people say, like, interesting. Okay, maybe let me hire two people, or let me hire one of those and one of another role that I actually would like to have, but that I don't have the budget to have. But now suddenly I do have the budget. So it's interesting to play around with that affordability as an idea of filling either more roles or getting more done with a different way of looking at talent or choosing talent. Yeah, it's or structuring the talent. It's interesting. I mean, but the Philippines is not only affordability. I think the Philippines goes beyond that, because the Philippines is such a large economy. I mean, developing economy, but nonetheless quite large and 110 million people, you do have a lot of talent. You do have a lot of people who are able to do something that you don't necessarily have in other countries. I mean, I'm currently in Germany. There's 500,000 people retiring every year. There's not enough young people coming in to actually replace all those roles. So it's almost like, is affordability really always the most important thing? Maybe actually pure availability is the most important one for some companies. Like, actually, I don't care if I have to pay the money. I just want somebody to do it, you know? So it's not always affordability. It can also be availability, or available at certain hours that people in your home country are not willing to do anymore, you know, and so on and so forth. So there's different angles of why a remote team, regardless if it's Philippines or anywhere else, can be attractive and can be and can help a lot to an organization. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think attitude comes into it as well. I mean,
Also forgot.
yeah,
Yeah, true.
I know so many of our clients, they've struggled, especially since Brexit in the UK. They really struggle to fill a lot of the roles, just because people don't want to do it for whatever reason, or they don't like, they just, yeah, they have an attitude towards work which is different than it was maybe 20 years ago. And actually, my experience in from working with people from the Philippines is the opposite. It's like they, in many ways, grateful for the opportunity to work still, and they actually really have a high amount of you. If you treat them well, they will treat you well, and their loyalty is like uncomparable with, say, the UK, where people are switching jobs just because, the change of weather or whatever, and that's not what, again, generalization here, but that's generally not what I see. It's actually the person will put up with a lot because they actually want the company to succeed. They become a part of not just the team, but they become a part of the success, and that's an attitude thing that they get involved with that from quite quickly. And I've seen that time and time again, both for myself, but also with my clients as well. So yeah,
Yeah, it's an attitude and it's a cultural thing, because there is an element in the Philippines of this. We are all in the same boat. We are all in the same kind of, almost like a family kind of setup. So we all do this together. That can also sometimes not be the best, but it does make a difference, because you work with people who really, under normal circumstances, are very committed and very engaged, and are as committed as you might be in the success of the organization and in success of the whole of what you're doing, which is great. You know, they that commitment makes a big difference. So yeah,
yeah.
it's we have seen great things there.
On the flip side of that, there's a slight negative I've experienced because of that, and because of the how loyal they are to their teammates as well. That actually, if you do have to let people go, you have to do it very carefully, not just for the
Yeah.
person you're letting go, but at the remaining team, and be very mindful of the effect that person's departure will have on their mindset. And that's something that I've experienced and done wrong in the past, but learned over the years to actually be hugely mindful of that.
Well, it goes back to what I said at the beginning. It's like your positive traits can also flip into a negative side.
Yeah,
So if you look at your team and your company almost like your extended family, then you can understand that if somebody of your extended family is being fired, you will not be very happy, and it will frustrate you or sadden you, and create all kinds of doubts. And that's an important part of management of expectations and managing of that change, that I think sometimes gets underestimated, specifically by certain other non-Filipino cultures, where letting people go is kind of like very normal. It's like, hey, well, didn't work out. Thank you so much. Like, see you later in the pub. Then in the Philippines, they're like, oh my God, how can you do this? It's like this. So that needs to be managed. That's fair. And again, that warmth and that commitment can then become a little bit of a problem. But I think that problem is always solvable as long as you're transparent and communicate correctly. Yeah. In that particular case, actually communicating is very important, instead of so over communicating instead of under communicating. It becomes important. But that's what I mentioned, is like, that is part of, in our case, the consultative approach is part of what we try to explain to our clients. And when this situation happens, and they do happen, that somebody doesn't work out, or that a certain part of the team needs to be changed. So when that happens, we make it clear, like, hey, let's create a plan. Let's create an action plan on how we're approaching this. How do we explain this to the rest of the team and so on and so forth, so that it doesn't backfire. And that's an important part of that bridge building between the Philippines and other cultures. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. Is there have you experienced a limit on the type or the level of role, I should say, that works well in the remote setting, whether it's from the Philippines or otherwise? It's like, what I'm thinking here is, so operations manager, C-suite, that sort of thing. Do you still do you often fill positions at that level, or is it more the sort of the next level down, the people who are actually doing the work, so to speak?
It's usually one level down, but that's more because those levels are honestly already quite rare in any organization. I mean, you only have one CEO by default, and the C-suite is usually not too big unless you are multinational, then that's a different story. And so by definition, those are not really, there are not many of those roles. I think, and also my experiences with myself, with my experience and looking at my clients, is those are usually roles where the owners, the founders, whoever it is, want those people around them. They want to touch them. They want to talk to them. They want to go into a meeting room. And that obviously becomes quite difficult when it's remote. It doesn't mean it cannot be done. And we have actually seen senior people being hired in the Philippines, but it's I wouldn't say it's standard. It's not common. Yeah, it's more the exception than the standard. But everything below that, from controllers to senior leaders, whatnot, that report to that top management, that we do and we fill and we have been quite successful. But I think, like anywhere in the world, the higher you go in that pyramid, the more rarer the talent becomes, and also the more expensive it becomes. And the affordability also starts shrinking, in the sense the gap between a very, very senior person in England and a very, very senior person with the same skill set in the Philippines, it actually shrinks quite dramatically, because there is not that many in the Philippines. Yeah. So in that moment, you really need to think, well, do I want to save that 30% and have it remote, or do I want to have that he with me, next to me, but then on the next layer, save more and be more flexible with my team building? So that's more of organizational planning, to figure out what's the most suitable there. Yeah.
So yeah, the reason
Organizational mapping, I think it's what the right name is, the right word for that. The business word, I think it's mapping, but anyway, whatever, it doesn't matter.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, so the reason I ask the question is because a role that I currently am actually looking to fill, or will be in the near future, and also one that often gets asked by my clients, is this operations manager type role. This person, like when you are a small business and you are just trying to step out, you're not quite at the level of needing a COO. You're still going to basically be the integrator visionary type role in the company, but you just want somebody to be able to take full responsibility and be accountable for operations, for help, like the hiring, the organization of the team, but also actually understanding how the whole business works, but at that sort of operations manager role. And that's where I was thinking, like, is it, if you've seen a lot of successes in that, and if so, like, what is it like when you say that the differential in the wage gap, for example, is that kind of role actually significantly more expensive than saying hiring a good marketing person or something, or is that a similar sort of level?
No, I think so. The expense is actually not really the question here. I think the gap is still a gap. I mean, and I think like a person like that in England or in Australia, wherever, will also be quite expensive, because again, you're looking at somebody who can be like a deputy and run operations for you. I think the bigger challenge for me to make it successful, or to see if it can be successful, is more trying to understand, well, where does this operation actually happen? If most of the team that executes the operation is actually not in the Philippines, then a Filipino in that position will struggle, just because, okay, so you're in the Philippines, but you're managing a team in England. That's kind of like not going to be that easy if the execution is happening in England. If on the other hand, we have seen this successfully happening with companies who have built actually the operational delivery in the Philippines, And then you have a local manager. Actually, there is the opposite. If you have most of the operational delivery in the Philippines, but the operational manager is overseas, that actually creates a gap and a disconnect, which can backfire on you. So we have some different ways of bridging that. I mean, it can be that the COO is still overseas, but then the deputy of that person is then in the Philippines and runs the day-to-day operational side. Or even in software delivery, we have also seen that where the CTO is overseas, but then the number two that runs the daily stand-ups and the daily, whatever communication that needs to happen is then in the Philippines, because it's then easier to manage than if that person is also overseas. So I think it really comes down to how is your operation actually structured and where are the people who are delivering that day in, day out sitting. So I think in that particular role, it's actually looking at, well, do I need that person close to where the operation is being executed, or can this person be remote, and how do I make that happen? And then it's the skill set that you need to find. Yeah, I don't have a perfect answer for you. I think
No,
it's a case by case kind of approach. Yeah.
no, I think it was a brilliant answer,
It's
actually.
like, take me, for example. Okay. I mean,
Yeah.
my operations are fully in the Philippines. I would not hire a COO or a VP of operations or whatever you want to call it in Germany. Yeah, that person is, I'm going to set that person up to failure, and I'm going to set up my team in the Philippines up for failure, because there is just that gap of time and space that will make it very hard. And it's not because this person cannot manage from an intellectual or experience side. It's just that because operations, all my recruitment, all my onboarding, all my HR, all of those things are executed in the Philippines. I personally think in that moment, I need this person to be over there. Yeah.
Yeah,
That
yeah,
would be
no,
at least my
totally.
take. Yeah. Yeah.
And when you talk about having your sort of team base in the Philippines, is this a everybody in the same office, or is it remotely spread out across the Philippines? Are people working in their own environments, or are they coming to an office and they're being managed centrally?
We have both. So that really comes down to the client's requirements. So we have clients who require everybody to be in the office 5 days a week. And so we provide that. We have clients who are with a hybrid setting, meaning to say 3 days in at home, 2 days in the office. Or we have some who actually say, hey, we only meet once a month, but once a month we all gather and then do lunch and whatever. So we facilitate all that. And then but we do have about 70% of our clients who are fully remote. They're like, listen, my team is remote already. So if they are now remote from home, that's fine. That's not a problem. Now, that makes our life not easier. That makes our life actually more complicated, because we still need to make sure they're all taken care of and all fine and all good and all this. And then we need to do online engagement activities and whatnot. So it actually sounds easy on paper, but having everybody in the office is actually easier when it comes to engagement and talking to people. But yeah, but it's really down to the clients and their preference.
Yeah. No, brilliant. Um, oh, fascinating. I've loved this. I've loved this interview. I knew I would. I hoped I would. But this has been incredibly insightful. And just to think about, yeah, the next level compared to where I'm at. And actually, I'm gonna share this recording with a couple of my clients before it even gets released, because I think they will be very interested to hear how you are facilitating this and how you are running this and the successes that you've shared. And yeah, I think this has been brilliant. So thank you very much.
No, thank you so much for having me. And anytime, we're happy to help anytime. Yeah, so
Yeah,
we're very, very vested into the success of Filipino remote teams, not because that's my business, but because really Filipinos are really good. And I think many times underappreciated a little bit in the global market of the talent they have and the capabilities they have. As I said at the beginning, I mean, people normally know about Filipino nurses and Filipino cleaning ladies and Filipino seafarers, but there's so much more. And they're really, really good. And as you said yourself, and they're really committed. They're great team members. Yeah.
yeah. No, fantastic. If people want to find out more about how you can help them to build a team, like how can they best get in touch with you, Nicholas?
Well, we have the webpage, and then obviously, I mean, me and my colleagues. But I mean, you can find me on LinkedIn and just shoot me a message, and we will get in touch. Yeah,
Cool.
or
And the
my
web
email.
page is
Good point. It's penbrothers.com. Yeah.
so yeah, penpenbrothers.com. And then your LinkedIn profile is let you say it because I always say the name wrong.
Nicolas Bivero. Yeah, it's
Bivero,
fine.
so Bivero.
ERO. Yeah, it's a
Okay, yeah.
Spanish name. Yeah.
Ah, perfect. Cool. I do have one question to ask you before you
Absolutely.
go. The name of this podcast is Systemize Your Success, but what does success mean to you and why?
For me personally, because I'm older than most people give me credit, success is actually, knowing that you're doing the right things and doing them correctly and being okay with that. I think for me, that's what success looks like nowadays.
Fantastic. I like it. Short and sweet. Nicolas, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and expertise. And yeah, I hopefully opening the eyes of some of our listeners to what is truly possible with working with remote teams. So thank you very much.
No, thank you so much for having me.